In the final glittering years of the 19th century, America's industrial elite waged a war unlike any other. It wasn't fought with weapons or words, but with marble and magnificence, with ballrooms and billion-dollar spectacles. The battlefield was Newport, Rhode Island, the summer playground where fortunes were displayed and reputations were destroyed with a single, calculated snub. And in this theater of social warfare, one woman would build the most audacious weapon ever conceived. Her name was Theresa Fair Ulrichs, and she was everything the old guard despised: new money, Western mining fortune. The granddaughter of Irish immigrants, an outsider who had married into New York society, only to find herself perpetually reminded that she would never truly belong. The dowagers of Fifth Avenue watched her, judged her, excluded her, always making certain she knew her place. But Theresa possessed something they hadn't counted on: ambition as vast as the continent her father had mined, and a burning determination not merely to join their ranks, but to eclipse them entirely. And so she built Rosecliff, not just a mansion, not merely a summer cottage, as Newport's absurd terminology would have it. Rosecliff was a declaration of war rendered in white terracotta and French classical splendor. It was the Grand Trianon of Versailles, reborn on American soil, completed in 1902 at staggering expense, featuring the largest ballroom in Newport, a space designed to hold more guests, more spectacle, more magnificence than any rival could match. Every detail, from the heart-shaped grand staircase to the palace gardens, sent a single, unmistakable message: Theresa Fair Ulrichs had arrived, and the old order would bow or be broken. Tonight, we enter the white marble corridors of Rosecliff to understand how a mining heiress from Nevada used beauty and brilliance as weapons to storm the gates of society, how America's aristocracy consumed itself in an orgy of competitive excess, and how one woman proved that in America, money spent with sufficient audacity can conquer even the most impenetrable fortress. This is the story of the mansion built not to welcome, but to humiliate. This is Rosecliff, and revenge, as they say, is a dish best served in a ballroom that seats 400. June 30th, 1871, Virginia City, Nevada. Theresa Alice Fair enters the world during the most reckless boom her father's fortune will ever see. The timing is everything. Her father, James Graham Fair, is one of 4 Irishmen who struck the big bonanza in the Comstock Lode, the richest pocket of silver ever found on American soil. Not a mine, a bonanza. Not hundreds of thousands, millions. In just 9 years, their consolidated Virginia Mining Company will extract over $100 million from the earth. James Fair's share alone will reach $50 million, roughly $1.4 billion in today's currency. But money and respectability are not the same thing. James Graham Fair was born in Clogher, County Tyrone, Ireland, in 1831. He arrived in America as a 12-year-old boy with nothing. By the time Tessie, as she's known, is old enough to understand, her father is one of the richest men in America. He's also one of the most despised. They call him Slippery Jim. His business partners tolerate him because he understands ore bodies better than anyone. His wife files for divorce in 1883, citing habitual adultery. The settlement, $5 million, is the largest in American history at that time. Even then, national public opinion sides with Theresa Rooney Fair, not with the senator. Because yes, James Fair bought himself a United States Senate seat from Nevada, served from 1881 to 1887, promoted silver issues, lost re-election because even his mining partner, John McKay, refused to support him. The man could extract silver from rock, he couldn't extract loyalty from anyone. Young Tessie grows up watching this, watching how San Francisco society accepts the McKays but keeps the Fairs at arm's length, watching how money opens doors, but lineage determines who walks through them. She winters in San Francisco and summers in Newport, where her mother takes her and her sister Virginia, where real society lives, where the rules are written by families whose fortunes are 3 generations deep, not 3 years. 1889. Tessie is 18. She's playing tennis at the Newport Casino, the social epicenter of American aristocracy, when she meets Herman Ulrichs, 25 years old, tall, athletic, charming. His family is from Baltimore, old money, respectable money. He's the American agent for Norddeutsche Lloyd, one of the largest steamship lines in the world. More importantly, his name appears in the social register without qualification. Herman Ulrichs is exactly what Tessie needs, not a husband, a key. They marry in 1890 in San Francisco. James Fair is not invited to his own daughter's wedding. He sends a check for $1 million anyway. Blood might not buy you a seat at the ceremony, but it can finance the campaign that comes after. 1891. Herman and Tessie Ulrichs purchase land on Bellevue Avenue from the estate of George Bancroft, the historian and diplomat who served as Secretary of the Navy and Minister to Germany. Bancroft's modest summer home sits on the property, surrounded by thousands of roses. His gardens along the cliff walk are famous. The property is called Rosecliff. Tessie keeps the name. Tears down everything else. Here's what she understands that others don't. Newport society isn't about being invited. It's about making others need to be invited by you. Mrs. Caroline Astor can exclude you from her ballroom, but she can't ignore you if your ballroom is bigger than hers. 1898. Construction begins, but first, the architect, Stanford White, age 45, partner at McKim, Mead and White, the most prestigious architectural firm in America. White has just finished renovating the Ulrichs New York townhouse, the former Mary Mason Jones mansion on Fifth Avenue, purchased for $167,000 and renovated for another $150,000. White knows what Tessie wants. He's designed the Washington Square Arch, Madison Square Garden, the Boston Public Library. He understands monuments, he understands theater. White models Rosecliff after the Grand Trianon at Versailles. Not a copy, an adaptation. King Louis XIV's garden retreat, but compressed, sharpened, weaponized. The exterior walls are brick, faced with white glazed terracotta manufactured to look like hand-carved marble. In bright sunlight, the local press will describe it as having the surface of a teacup. The plan is H-shaped, 2 residential wings connected by the largest ballroom in Newport, 40 feet wide, 80 feet long, 22-foot ceilings. It can seat 160 guests for dinner. Space remains for 300 more to dance. This is not accidental. Mrs. Astor's ballroom holds 400, but her ballroom is in New York. Tessie's is in Newport, during the summer season, where it matters most. The construction takes 3 years, costs $2.5 million, roughly $86 million today. Materials arrive on schedules tighter than passenger trains. White controls every detail. He doesn't just design the structure, he selects the furniture, Gobelin tapestries, cloisonné vases, Renaissance statuary, Jacobean furniture, Sèvres china, libraries, silver sets. He even designs the garden, blue flowers only, to complement the white facade. The work goes on. The system is industrial. Timber arrives from forests whose names Tessie will never know. Terracotta from kilns whose workers will never see the finished building. Glass from Belgium, packed in sawdust, shipped across an ocean. Nothing improvised, nothing left to chance. And underneath it all, invisible, essential, the workers. Step past the ballroom, past the reception rooms with their painted ceilings and crystal chandeliers, past the mahogany paneling and the silk wall coverings. Down the service stairs, behind the facade. Here is the other Rosecliff, the machine that keeps the fantasy running. The mansion rises on 3 visible floors, but that third floor, hidden behind the roof-lined balustrade, belongs entirely to the staff. 20 small rooms for servants, narrow corridors, lower ceilings, plain walls, no decoration, a laundry with industrial pressing equipment, space for dozens of people whose names will never appear in society columns. At peak operation, Rosecliff requires approximately 40 servants, maids, footmen, cooks, laundresses, valets, butler, housekeeper, gardeners, stable hands, each role precisely defined, each person essential, each person replaceable. The wages tell their own story. According to payroll records from comparable Newport estates, housemaids earn $18 to $25 per month. That's roughly $600 to $800 today. The chef might earn $100 to $180 monthly, $3,000 to $5,000 in modern currency. For comparison, the average American worker in 1902 earns less than $500 per year. The annual operating cost of Rosecliff likely exceeds $50,000, $1.7 million today. Each month, the house consumes what a working family might see in 3 years. The servants travel on Tessie's schedule. When she moves from New York to Newport each May, they go first, opening windows, airing rooms, polishing silver, stocking pantries, making ready. When she returns to New York in September, they follow, closing shutters, covering furniture, banking fires, putting the house to sleep. They move through the house along separate paths, service staircases, narrow and unadorned, hidden behind panels, passages that let them appear and disappear without being seen. The design ensures that staff can maintain the illusion of effortless luxury, fires lit before dawn, meals appearing as if conjured, dirty dishes vanishing, all of it performed by people moving through spaces deliberately designed to render them invisible. In the basement, the infrastructure reveals itself fully. Boiler rooms, coal storage. The heating system alone burns tons of coal each winter to maintain temperature. The kitchen operates on an industrial scale, copper pots, professional ranges, ice storage. A separate cold kitchen for preparing dishes that require no cooking. All of it coordinated with military precision to serve dinners for 160 guests with multiple courses, timed to the minute. This parallel world was designed to remain out of sight, but the evidence survives in architectural drawings, in supply ledgers, in the dimensions of those 20 servant rooms tucked behind the balustrade, an invisible city built to service the visible one. Records don't preserve their names. Architects drew their quarters. Tessie paid their wages, but history remembers the architect, the heiress, the parties. The hands that lit the fires remain anonymous. July 10th, 1900. The house is not finished. Tessie doesn't care. She moves in anyway and begins hosting immediately. Because waiting would be weakness. The ballroom is complete. That's what matters. Painted ceiling depicting clouds and cherubs, crystal chandeliers designed with musical instruments, lyres and trumpets visible in the metalwork, gilt molding, mirrors to multiply the light, windows overlooking the Atlantic. A heart-shaped staircase in the entrance hall, designed for women to descend with dramatic flair while guests watch from below. Tessie throws herself into Newport society with tremendous energy. She has to. The hierarchy is rigid. Mrs. Caroline Astor stands at the apex, flanked by Ward McAllister, who literally coined the term the 400 to describe New York's social elite. To be received by Mrs. Astor is to exist. To be excluded is to not exist, no matter how much money you have. But by 1900, Mrs. Astor's grip is weakening. Younger, more aggressive hostesses are rising. Mamie Fish, Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, and now Tessie Ulrichs. Together, they form what contemporaries call the triumvirate. 3 women who will reshape Newport society by ignoring the old rules and writing new ones. Tessie's strategy is simple. She hosts parties so extravagant, so imaginative, so talked about that people have to attend or risk being the only ones who weren't there. She doesn't wait for invitations. She makes herself unavoidable. August 17th, 1901. A lawn party for her 10-year-old son, Herman Jr., his friends, and their parents. Professional acrobats perform in a 40 by 25-foot red tent on the back lawn. 5 smaller tents host sideshows. Fortune tellers, shooting galleries, a wheel of fortune. Peddlers sell cheap merchandise. An African-American vocal group sings popular songs. A circus band plays continuously. Tea and refreshments for adults. Lemonade for children. The papers cover it extensively. Then come the dinner parties. Not 6 guests, not 12, 160. With French-trained chefs preparing multiple courses. With musicians playing from a gallery. With flowers shipped from Europe and arranged in patterns that take days to complete. At one event, she arranges a fairy tale dinner where everything is themed around children's stories. At another, she books Harry Houdini, the most famous magician in America, to entertain during dinner. The guests watch as he escapes from handcuffs, straitjackets, locked boxes, magic in a Versailles replica on the Rhode Island coast, but her masterpiece arrives on August 19th, 1904. The Bal Blanc, August 1904. The week of the Astor Cup race. Every important person in Newport is in residence. Tessie sends invitations for the Bal Blanc. The concept is simple, devastating. Everything white. Guests receive instructions, wear white, men in white tie, women in white gowns, hair powdered white or covered with white wigs. No exceptions. Tessie herself wears a white lace dress embroidered with silver thread. Everything else matches. Banks of white hydrangeas, white roses, white orchids, white lilies of the valley surround the house inside and out. The fountain on the east lawn is stocked with white swans. On the Atlantic, visible from the veranda, a mock fleet of specially constructed white ships floats on the waves, their hulls lit from within, creating the illusion of a naval force anchored offshore. Dinner begins at 10 o'clock. The ballroom glows. Every surface reflects light. The crystal chandeliers, the mirrors, the polished floors, the white flowers, the white fabric, the white skin powder on every face. It's overwhelming, theatrical. Exactly what Tessie intended. The party cost Herman Elrichs $30,000, roughly $1 million today, for one night. Contemporary newspapers describe it as one of the most spectacular entertainments ever staged in Newport. Tessie has succeeded. She's no longer the Nevada silver heiress trying to break in. She's one of the 3 most powerful hostesses in American society. Mrs. Fish, Mrs. Belmont, Mrs. Ulrichs. Not bad for Slippery Jim Fair's daughter. 1906, 2 years after the Bal Blanc. 4 years after Rosecliff's completion. Stanford White is in New York. Madison Square Garden, the Rooftop Theater, June 25th, hot evening. Opening night of Mam'zelle Champagne. During a musical number titled I Could Love a Million Girls, a man stands, walks toward White's table, fires 3 shots. The first 2 kill the architect. The third is for emphasis. The shooter is Harry Kendall Thaw, a Pittsburgh millionaire with a history of mental instability. His motive? Jealousy over White's prior relationship with Thaw's wife, the actress Evelyn Nesbit. White had met Nesbit when she was 16 and he was 47. Drugged her, raped her. Years later, married to Thaw, she told her husband. Thaw never forgave it. The newspapers call it the trial of the century. Every detail of White's private life is exposed. The apartment on 24th Street with the red velvet swing and mirrored bedroom. The stream of young chorus girls. The sexual appetites that his fame and wealth allowed him to indulge without consequence. Until consequence arrived in the form of 3 bullets. White dies at 52, at the height of his career, in the building he designed. His reputation, built on the Washington Square Arch and the Boston Public Library and Pennsylvania Station, is posthumously destroyed by the lurid testimony of his murder trial. Few of his friends defend him. The architectural community largely stays silent. Rosecliff stands as one of his last major residential commissions, perfect in its proportions, elegant in its execution, untouched by the scandal of its creator's death. The house doesn't care who designed it. The house only cares about its function, and that function is hosting. Also in 1906, barely 4 months after Stanford White's murder, Herman Ulrichs dies of a heart attack. He's 56 years old, aboard ship returning from Europe. By then, Herman and Tessie are effectively separated. He spent increasing amounts of time on the West Coast, San Francisco, Baltimore, anywhere but Newport and New York. Tessie's energy, her ambition, her relentless social campaign has worn him down. He'd married her for love. She'd married him for legitimacy. The transaction was never balanced. When news reaches Tessie, she's devastated. Despite their estrangement, he'd been the foundation of her position. His name gave her access. His patience let her operate. Without him, she's still Mrs. Herman Ulrichs. But the Mrs. now carries different weight. She continues to spend summers at Rosecliff, continues to host, but something shifts. The triumvirate begins to fracture. Mamie Fish remains formidable. Alva Belmont throws her energy into the suffrage movement. Tessie becomes more obsessed with perfection. Every morning at 9 o'clock sharp, she inspects the entire property. Every room, the garage, the stables. If she finds dust, she makes the staff clean it again. If the marble floors aren't spotless, she mops them herself. The house must be perfect, because perfection is control, and control is all she has left. Her niece, Blanche Ulrichs, later writes that Tessie was strongly addicted to society as a business. Not a hobby, not a pleasure, a business. With inventory to maintain, competitors to outmaneuver, market position to defend. Rosecliff is her office, her factory, her showroom. The parties are product launches. The guest list is customer acquisition. But the world is changing, and Tessie doesn't notice, or doesn't want to notice, or can't afford to notice. The 16th Amendment is ratified. The United States now has a federal income tax. This changes everything. Before 1913, the ultra-wealthy paid no federal tax on their income. James Fair made $50 million and kept $50 million. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Morgans, every dollar they earned stayed in their pockets. They could build mansions like Rosecliff and operate them at annual costs that would bankrupt cities, and the government took nothing. After 1913, the math shifts. At first, the rates are modest, 7% on income over $500,000. But the precedent is set. The government can now claim a portion of wealth, and during World War I, rates climbed dramatically. By 1918, the top marginal rate hits 77%. For families operating estates like Rosecliff, this is catastrophic. The houses still cost the same to maintain. The servants still need wages. The coal still needs buying. The gardens still need tending. But now, the money to pay for it is being taxed away. What used to be automatic becomes impossible. Newport's Gilded Age begins its long, slow collapse. 1914, World War I begins in Europe. American society shifts its attention. Extravagant parties during wartime feel obscene. The social season contracts, fewer guests, smaller events, less spectacle. Tessie keeps trying. She's in her 40s now. This life, the balls, the dinners, the competition, is all she knows. It's what she fought for. It's what Rosecliff was built to enable. Stopping would be admitting defeat. But she's running out of opponents. Mrs. Astor is long dead. Mamie Fish scales back. Alva Belmont focuses on political causes. Tessie finds herself hosting parties for smaller crowds. The ballroom that was built to humiliate New York society now holds echoes. 1918. The war ends, but the world it ends into is not the world that existed in 1914. The Gilded Age is over. Not officially. No one announces it, but everyone knows. The mansions along Bellevue Avenue begin their transformation. Some are sold, some are closed for seasons, then years. Some are dismantled, their contents auctioned. The chandeliers go to dealers. the tapestries to collectors, the libraries to universities. What took decades to assemble scatters in months. Tessie retreats further into Rosecliff. She spends more time in Newport, less in New York. The Fifth Avenue mansion feels too large, too expensive, too much. Her niece describes the final years with brutal clarity. Tessie spends her days wandering Rosecliff, lost in a haze of memories, greeting and seating her imagined guests. The parties continue in her mind. The ballroom fills with people who aren't there. She issues invitations no one receives. She arranges dinners no one eats. The house remains spotless. The morning inspections continue. But now she's inspecting for guests who will never arrive. November 22nd, 1926. Tessie dies at Rosecliff. She's 55 years old. Cause of death is listed as complications from pneumonia. But her family knows the truth. She died of obsolescence. The world she'd mastered ceased to exist, and she couldn't master the one that replaced it. Her son, Herman Ulrich Jr., inherits Rosecliff. He's 35. He has a wife and family. He continues to spend summers there through the 1930s, but the scale shrinks. No more balls, no more dinners for 160, smaller gatherings, quieter summers. The Great Depression arrives in 1929. What the income tax started, the Depression finishes. Families that survived the tax shock can't survive the market crash. Fortunes that seemed eternal evaporate. The money simply stops coming. 1939, the Ulrichs family closes Rosecliff. 13 years after Tessie's death, they sell the contents at auction. The contents, not the house. They can't sell the house. No one will buy it. At the auction, dealers arrive. Churches, collectors. The chandeliers go for a fraction of their value. The pianos, the furniture. A church buys the built-in organ. The knickknacks scatter to 100 different owners. What Henry James called the loot of Europe, the accumulation of decades, disperses in a day. The house stands empty. Windows dark, doors locked. 40 rooms, 28,800 square feet, the largest ballroom in Newport, and no one wants it. 1941, Herman Ulrichs Jr. sells Rosecliff for $21,000. Yes, $21,000. The house that cost $2.5 million to build in 1902, equivalent to $86 million today, sells for an amount that would barely cover 1 year's operating costs. Adjusted for inflation, he receives about $400,000 in today's currency, less than half of 1% of the construction cost, 40 years. That's how long it took for a Gilded Age masterpiece to become nearly worthless. The buyer is Gertrude Niesen, a singer, a vaudeville performer. She's had success in the 1930s and 1940s. She wants a summer retreat. She redecorates Rosecliff lavishly, spends money she probably shouldn't spend. Then she makes a fatal error. She doesn't hire a winter caretaker. One winter, records suggest around 1944, temperatures drop. The pipes freeze, then they burst. Water floods through the house. Temperatures stay below freezing. The water turns to ice. Rosecliff becomes an ice palace. Literally, rooms filled with frozen water, chandeliers coated in icicles, floors buckled, walls cracked. The damage is catastrophic. Gertrude sells immediately, takes her loss, walks away. 1946, Ray Allen Van Cleef buys Rosecliff. He's determined to restore it. Hires craftsmen. Replaces damaged flooring. Repairs plaster. Refurbishes rooms. The work takes years, costs tens of thousands. Finally, it's ready. Van Cleef boards a train in Providence, heading to Newport for his first dinner in the restored Rosecliff. He's driving from the train station to the house when another car hits his. He dies in the accident, never sets foot in the house he saved. The story is almost too perfect. The architect shot on a rooftop. The original owner dies at sea. The restorer dies on the road to his first visit, as if the house resists being saved. But someone does save it. 1947, J. Edgar Monroe and his wife Louise purchase Rosecliff. They're from New Orleans. Edgar made his fortune in business. They want a summer escape from southern heat. They find it in Newport. The Monroes are different. They don't try to recreate the Gilded Age. They host parties, yes, but theirs are looser, livelier. Mardi Gras-themed events with guests arriving in bright satin costumes, sequins, feathers. They shock the remaining old guard, who remember when Newport meant white tie and strict protocol. The Monroes don't care. They're having fun. They use Rosecliff the way it was designed to be used, for entertaining, but without the social warfare. No one is trying to humiliate anyone. No one is fighting for position. The ballroom is just a ballroom again, and they let filmmakers in. 1956. High society shoots scenes at Rosecliff. Grace Kelly, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby. The house becomes part of Hollywood mythology. 1957, the biggest one. The Great Gatsby. Director Jack Clayton wants to portray Jay Gatsby's mansion. He considers several options, settles on Rosecliff, the ballroom, the symmetrical facade, the courtyard, all perfect for F. McShee, Scott Fitzgerald's vision of new money trying to impress old money through architectural excess. Robert Redford as Gatsby, Mia Farrow as Daisy, and Rosecliff as the physical embodiment of the American dream's beautiful, doomed architecture. Edgar Monroe has one rule: no one goes in the fountain. He's just spent $50,000 restoring it. Clayton agrees. Then, once Monroe goes to bed, Clayton films the party scene, encourages the extras to frolic in the fountain, trashes it completely. Monroe is furious. But the movie is made, and Rosecliff is now globally famous, not as Mrs. Ulrich's Newport cottage, as Gatsby's mansion. Fiction overwrites history. 197. The Monroes are in their 70s. They've summered at Rosecliff for 25 years. They love the house, but they're practical. They know they won't live forever. They know maintaining an estate this size will be impossible for their heirs. So they make a decision that saves Rosecliff from the fate of so many other Gilded Age mansions. They donate the house, all its furnishings, and a $2 million endowment to the Preservation Society of Newport County. Not a sale, a gift. With conditions: the house must be preserved, must be open to the public, must be maintained at the standard it deserves. The Preservation Society accepts. In 1976, Rosecliff opens for tours. The Monroes still visit occasionally for charity events. They watch tourists walk through the ballroom where they threw Mardi Gras parties. They see film crews arrive to shoot more movies. True Lies in 1994, Amistad in 1997, 27 Dresses in 2008. The house becomes what it was always meant to be, a stage. But now the audience is everyone. Not just the 400. Not just Newport society. Anyone who buys a ticket can stand in the ballroom that Tessie built to conquer a world that no longer exists. Today, Rosecliff hosts weddings, corporate events, the Newport Flower Show each spring, the Nutcracker each winter. The heart-shaped staircase sees brides descending now, not society matrons. The ballroom that once humiliated rivals now hosts receptions for people who've never heard of Mrs. Astor or Ward McAllister or the 400. The house is lightly furnished. Much of the original furniture was sold in that 1939 auction and scattered. The Preservation Society has filled the rooms with period-appropriate pieces, but they make no claim to authenticity. The house is a set now, a backdrop. And it's honest about it. On the third floor, those 20 servant rooms remain, small, plain. You can visit them during special tours, stand in the narrow corridors where maids carried breakfast trays, where valets pressed evening clothes, where laundresses worked industrial pressing equipment in rooms that baked with steam and heat. The architectural drawings are preserved at the New York Historical Society, Stanford White's original plans, the elevations, the details, evidence of every decision he made. In the drawings, you can see how the service circulation was designed to keep staff invisible, how the ballroom was engineered to maximize grandeur, how every element served Tessie's singular purpose, to force recognition from people who didn't want to give it. The terracotta facade still gleams in bright sunlight, still looks like carved marble from a distance. Up close, you can see the manufacturing process. The panels molded, glazed, fitted together. A palazzo built from industrial materials, designed to create an illusion, which is what all of Bellevue Avenue was. An elaborate illusion, sustained by enormous amounts of money, labor, and will. And when any of those three elements faltered, the illusion collapsed. Let's do the math. The math everyone avoided while the parties were happening. Construction cost, $2.5 million. Equivalent today, $86 million. Annual operating cost, approximately $50,000. Equivalent today, $1.7 million. Average American worker's annual salary in 1902, $480. Equivalent today, $16,000. It would take a worker 104 years to earn what it cost to run Rosecliff for 1 year. 104 years of continuous work, with no expenses, saving every penny to match 1 year's operating budget. Tessie's father left her $50 million when he died in 1894. She spent it on New York real estate, Newport estates, jewelry, gowns, parties, travel, staff, maintenance, everything required to sustain her position. When she died in 1926, 32 years later, the fortune was substantially diminished. Her son sold Rosecliff 15 years after her death for $21,000, the price of a nice car, for a palace. The workers who built it left no records. We don't know how many. We don't know their names, with rare exceptions. We know the architect. We know the heiress. We know the society columnists who covered the parties. But the hands that laid the terracotta, the craftsmen who carved the woodwork, the masons who set the foundations, anonymous, essential, forgotten. They were paid wages that let them survive, housed in tenements or company housing, moved from one project to the next, built Rosecliff, then built the house next door, then moved to Boston or New York to build something else. Their labor created the stage on which the Gilded Age performed, but they weren't allowed on stage. Tessie's servants, the 40 people who ran Rosecliff at peak, lived on the 3rd floor. Small rooms, plain furniture. They earned wages that seemed generous compared to factory work, but paltry compared to what Tessie spent on a single dinner party. They were essential to her success. She could not have been Mrs. Herman Ulrich's society leader without them. But history remembers her name, not theirs. This is the pattern. The cost is always distributed downward. The glory always rises upward. Here's what gnaws. Was it worth it? Not in financial terms. Obviously not. No one builds a Rosecliff expecting profit. But in human terms. In the terms that matter when you're lying in a mansion at age 55, dying of pneumonia and obsolescence, remembering parties that no longer happen for a world that no longer exists. Tessie fought for recognition from people she shouldn't have needed to impress. She weaponized architecture against social gatekeepers who derived their power from exclusion. She won, briefly, and then the ground shifted, and winning stopped mattering. She never had children beyond Herman Jr., never pursued interests outside of society, never developed a life that could survive the collapse of the Gilded Age social structure. When it fell, she fell with it. The house outlasted her. The ballroom still stands. But the woman who built it as proof of her arrival died proving only that arrival means nothing if you don't have somewhere else to go afterward. Stanford White created something beautiful, symmetrical, elegant, perfect in its proportions, but he created it for a woman who needed a weapon, not a home. And he died violently, publicly, with his reputation shredded, 4 years after Rosecliff's completion. His greatest works, Penn Station, Madison Square Garden, dozens of Newport mansions, stand as his legacy, but his death overshadows them. In popular memory, Stanford White is the architect who got shot for being a predator, not the architect who shaped American architecture for a generation. The workers who built Rosecliff, if we could ask them, would probably say the job paid better than most, that they were proud of their craftsmanship, that the house turned out well, but their pride didn't survive in archives. Their names didn't make it into history books. They got paid, they moved on, they died unremembered. So who won? Not Tessie, who died of irrelevance, not Stanford White, who died of consequence, not the workers, who died anonymous, not Herman Ulrichs, who wanted a marriage and got a social campaign, not even Newport Society, which spent decades fighting over position only to watch the entire game become obsolete when the tax code changed. The house won. The house survived. Buildings outlast their builders, their owners, their purposes. Rosecliff was built as a weapon in a social war. It's now a museum visited by tourists who've never heard of the war. The ballroom that was designed to humiliate the 400 now hosts proms and sweet 16s and corporate retreats. The house doesn't care. The house never cared. It was always just a stage. The actors change. The show goes on. Stand on Bellevue Avenue today. Face number 548. The white terracotta still gleams. The symmetrical facade still evokes Versailles. The building still looks like an impossible dream dropped onto the American coastline. But now you know the rest. You know it cost $2.5 million and bankrupted its legacy. You know it required 40 servants whose names we don't know. You know it was designed by an architect who died violently and a woman who died lonely. You know it was sold for less than the price of a car, flooded into an ice palace, restored by a man who died before enjoying it, and finally saved by a couple who understood that some things are worth preserving even if they can never again serve their original purpose. The beauty is real. The craftsmanship is real. The achievement is real. Stanford White's design is masterful. The proportions are perfect. The details are exquisite. Standing in the ballroom, you can feel what Tessie wanted you to feel, awe. But the cost is also real. The human cost, the financial cost, the moral cost of building monuments to individual ambition while hundreds of people work for wages that can never buy them anything close to what they're building. Rosecliff didn't humiliate New York society. It joined it. It became one more house in a collection of houses where the ultra-wealthy competed to outspend each other, while the foundation of their entire world was eroding beneath them. Income tax, World War I, the Great Depression, social change, all of it inevitable, none of it visible from the ballroom. Tessie thought she was building permanence. She built a stage set that lasted 40 years. But here's the thing, and this is important. The stage set survived. Not in the way she intended, not serving the purpose she designed it for, but it survived. Because the Monroes gave it away. Because the Preservation Society maintains it. Because tourists visit. Because Hollywood films there. Because people get married there. Because the house, divorced from its original purpose, found new purposes. Maybe that's the only victory available. Not permanence in intention, but permanence in adaptation. Not surviving as you were, but surviving by becoming something else. Tessie built Rosecliff to conquer a world that didn't want her. The world ended. The house remains. And now it belongs to everyone. Every ticket holder, every film crew, every bride descending that heart-shaped staircase, every tourist standing in the ballroom, trying to imagine what it felt like when the chandeliers blazed and the orchestra played and Mrs. Ulrichs surveyed her domain. The question that opened this story was, who actually paid for it? The answer, everyone. The workers with their bodies, Stanford White with his reputation, Herman with his happiness, Tessie with her sanity, the Ulrichs family with their fortune. Every person who maintained the illusion paid something. Some paid in money, some paid in time, some paid in humanity. But in the end, the house paid nothing. The house just stood there, reflecting light, hosting whatever happened inside it, surviving. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that we shouldn't build beautiful things, but that beauty has a price, and someone always pays it, and it's rarely the people who get to enjoy it most. Rosecliff is open to the public. You can visit, you can stand in the ballroom, you can walk up the heart-shaped staircase,